All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Our webinar today is Future-Proofing Life Sciences, Why Sustainability Partnerships Are Critical for Growth in 2026. Today, we'll be exploring how sustainability has evolved from a supporting function to a core driver of innovation, workforce development, and long-term business growth. This isn't just theory. We're going to see some real-world examples and processes that work. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please don't hesitate to put them in the QA chat. We won't read your name or your company. Let's see. My name is Anthony Chambers. I'm a longtime advisory services consultant, mostly in life sciences, R&D, quality manufacturing, tech transfer. A little bit about Astrix. We're an almost 30-year-old consultancy. We advise and support clients who are at the intersection of science, technology, and business. If science is at the heart of your enterprise, that's where we work. And about 90% of our folks hold advanced degrees. Our agenda. So today, we're going to walk through how sustainability has been impacting organizations, what actually works, what creates shared value, and how intentional partnerships can create measurable impact for businesses and communities. We are very fortunate to have two exceptional leaders with us today. Melissa Yu, CEO and co-founder of Seeding Labs, is an award-winning global nonprofit dedicated to increasing access to scientific resources in low-resource settings. And Belen Benitez, founder of Baseline SD. She is a sustainability strategist and trusted advisor to executives and organizations. Belen is key to sustainability at Astrix, and she has embedded sustainability into our strategy, governance, and long-term value creation. All right. So, Belen, I guess you and I were talking a few days ago about innovation and how often people view that as accretive growth or ways of working or methods, but potentially, what could you help show us what sustainability is in your view for innovation?
Well, thank you, Anthony, for having us here. I'm really happy to share what Astrix has been able to achieve in this 2.5 years, almost 3, that I've been supporting the organization. And to get to your question, I think that for a long time, the word innovation meant new technology or a faster process or a product that disrupts the market. It was almost exclusively defined by speed or novelty or anything that came with a competitive edge. But sustainability was something else entirely. It was completely separate. So you thought about it like a CSR report or a tree planting initiative or a volunteering day during holiday. It was like more of an isolated type of activities that really didn't connect to the business strategy. That framing was obsolete, and it was frankly what most companies and most organizations were doing or have been doing for many years. And I think that innovation at its core has always been about solving problems, and honestly, problems that matter. Things that not only support the business, but support everybody else around the business. The question has always been about like, what problems are we willing to see and which problems are we going to pick to solve? So when I started working in sustainability almost 2 decades ago, and in many countries and in several industries, like I've worked in building materials and staffing agencies, and you still have the same exact problem. It doesn't matter if the industry is different, the problem is still the same. You must get the business leaders to understand that the environmental and social pressures are not external noise. In fact, they are the business environment. So if you ignore that noise, and then your strategy is built on a completely blind spot. So what changed today is that the world has caught up a little bit to what sustainability professionals have been saying for years. Things like climate risk is financial risk, or supply chain transparency is operational resilience, or workforce well-being can be translated into talent retention and brand equity. Things like regulatory frameworks that are now everywhere. Think about the CSRD in Europe. It's not a bureaucratic process. It's the new architecture of market access. So that's how you have to think about it. So to understand how innovation has evolved, let me give you an example. I think that will work best. Um, a decade ago, a company could innovate around sustainability just by creating something slightly greener. That also brought a problem because there was a few years ago, everybody was greenwashing and everybody was calling their product green just because of a green label or things like that. But today, the leading organizations are innovating through sustainability. They're using the ESG data to spot those inefficiencies before they become crises. They are using the sustainability commitments to win contracts, attract capital, retain talent, have better suppliers. So that information about sustainability performance is really being used in decision making within the business. So at Astrix, that's exactly the shift we've been building for the past few years. When we, for example, when we set our science-based targets, it was not just an environmental exercise that was client-driven. It was a very strategic signal to our clients and our partners that we operate with rigor and long-term thinking. So we need to understand that the businesses that will lead the next decade are not choosing between growth and sustainability. They are. It's not two separate conversations anymore. They go hand in hand. It's all together. So if you can look at this slide, we made a deliberate choice to organize sustainability thinking around four interconnected pillars. So if you notice something about the slide, these are four separate silos, but they are overlapping circles. That's intentional. So cross-functionality becomes a fundamental piece of sustainability. So in people, we will cover everything related to employees, stakeholders, our business, social equity, human rights. And that pillar is the one that will help us determine whether we can attract and retain talent in one of the most competitive markets in the world. You just said 90% of Astrix employees hold PhDs, and we're talking about almost 1,000 employees. So think about how competitive that is. For example, with the planet, it's about environmental stewardship for risk management. It's not only about compliance, it's about leading with a different business model. With principles of governance, of course, nothing matters. None of the other pillars will matter if we didn't have the right accountability structures, responsible decision making, transparency, ethical conduct. That's a differentiator. It's what it in my opinion, it's what makes sustainability credible instead of performative. And finally, prosperity, which is, I think is the pillar that most fits the conversation of today, is how our business model drives economic growth and job creation and innovation, not instead of sustainability, but through it. So that's how we work with our clients, our suppliers, and the community itself. So at the center of it, that's where innovation lives. We can also move to the next slide, and I can give you kind of a little example of how we've done it at Astrix. So most organizations start with compliance. They do what regulators require and check the boxes. It's important. It's really important. I strongly believe that. But we need to move to different maturity phases, right? So at Astrix, we've done it a little different. We've deliberately moved through building the foundation, which is more of the housekeeping, making sure that we have internally what we want to project externally. So measuring our carbon footprint, policy standardization, materiality assessments, governance structure, compliance systems, all of that. And then the second phase, it's basically the strategic integration. So that's, for example, how AI governance with sustainability criteria, sustainable procurement embedded in supplier management, ESG linked to talent strategy in HR. It's a full accountability structure, and then you kind of like start seeing a little bit of the cross functionality here of how it's not only isolated initiatives or activities, but it's connected to business strategy and to process and to internal protocols. So the businesses winning right now are not the ones that have waited for the business case to be completely undeniable, but it's the ones that are leading sustainability, and they made the decision before that really happened to them. So, and that's what creates an amazing culture within an organization, and that's something absolutely impossible to replicate by competitors. So that's why it needs to be at the core of the business strategy.
Yeah, I think when you reframe sustainability that way, you're really just embedding it as operational decision making. I mean, it literally becomes part of the organization, and then innovation is the outcome of that rather than additive. So I think that's really interesting. Melissa, so when you think of sustainability and unlocking potential and driving innovation at Seeding Labs, maybe you could help us understand how you all do that there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're a social impact organization. And so, the perspective that we look at, like what is supposed to be sustainable, it's a long-term progress for humanity and the planet. And when you're thinking about progress for humanity and its sustainability, the factors are exactly the same as Belen said, people, planet, prosperity, and principles. But I think I like this framework that we're showing on the slide here because it shows it in a different relationship. And maybe you can think of this framework as if you zoom in on that center of those four circles that Belen showed, that you get this, if you look very closely, you get this donut. And what this donut shows is, okay, you have one piece, people, and this dark green line on it is a floor, right? You have to meet the needs of the people. But on the other side of it is the planet. We all live on one planet. It's a closed environment, and there's a ceiling for, living within those resources. And if you can make a space between the needs of the people and the constraints of the planet, then that's where we have a prosperous, principled, safe, just, and sustainable society. I also like this framework because it illustrates how easily any part of our society can push us out of balance, right? You can go beyond the ecological constraints, you can go below the social foundations. And I'm sure we all know different parts of society where we are above and below. So at Seeding Labs, So let me just get a little bit more into how we get into that green space. And that's where the innovation comes in. And innovation that meets different and changing needs of all of the different communities around the world, right? There's no one place that has the same ecological ceiling. And the resources may dictate different social foundations as well. And just like how a company is like a system of employees, operations, sales, governance for innovation and the innovation ecosystem, it's made up of, lots of different parts, the scientific workforce, different institutions from academia to industry to governance. You have knowledge being generated, and then you have products and services that ultimately shape the health of our people and planet. All right, so now at Seeding Labs, we're a science-based organization. And Anthony, if you can move to the next slide. When we look at, the world, we see that there's a key piece of the innovation ecosystem, which is the resources needed to do science. And those are grossly imbalanced across the world. And so, the majority of the world, and you can see in this cartograph, might be pronouncing that kind of funny. Majority of the world lives in developing countries. But when you look at where the resources for science are, funding, people, institutions, 80% of those resources exist in just 10 countries of the world. And when you are living in a place with lack of resources, that means that your whole system of innovation is very weak. And then we end up in a world where science is not living up to its potential and is not benefiting everyone. So this is the space, this is the social problem that we're seeing. And at Seeding Labs, we found a very simple solution. If we can go to the next one, we connect the institutions within the innovations ecosystem that are responsible for generating knowledge and talent with the resources for them to carry out their training and research goals. And with access to resources like laboratory equipment, which is the main resource that Seeding Labs provides, universities can power up their local ecosystems. They unlock human potential, they generate knowledge that feeds into policies, services, and products, and ultimately make us safe and prosperous. So we have those institutions, we have the outcomes at the end that we want to get to. A key part of this story and the solution, though, to getting to that side is bringing together corporations and businesses and connecting them into this innovation ecosystem. And what we do at Seeding Labs here is we help companies connect their excess resources back into this innovation ecosystem and helping them move from being an extractive piece of the system to a to being part of the cycle of regeneration, so feeding back into it. And with just that one resource that I mentioned earlier, laboratory equipment fed into just one node of this ecosystem, universities, we've actually been able to see that we have unlocked human talent. The institutions are able to staff technical careers, and the universities themselves are strengthened, and they have strengthened connections to the rest of the overall ecosystem. So we'll talk a bit more about that later. And I want to emphasize again that businesses are already part of this ecosystem, and the better that they can work together with institutions, other institutions, educational institutions, social institutions, government institutions, the better we as a system can achieve our shared goal of maintaining the safe and prosperous existence for humanity on our planet. That's how we get to be in that green space. And so I've been spending a while like waxing poetic about this big picture of, what's on the donut. But let me take a second to bring it back down to how businesses actually move onto this pathway of, being regenerative, being part of the cycle. And to do that, you do that like you do for any goal that your business might have. You bring in experts. You bring in experts when you need legal support, accounting, and in this case, it's you want to have social impact, and that's where organizations like Seeding Labs shines. And as Belen said before, it's really important to take a look at your internal resources. Do you have time, funding, and resources to implement? And again, at Seeding Labs, we've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of companies, and I'm really excited to give more examples later about, how specifically we've worked with companies so that they can benefit from partnering with social impact organizations.
That's really cool. I think when we were talking earlier in the week when we were just reviewing between the three of us, one of the where we landed was, okay, so we have innovation and we're growing. The outcomes for folks that participate and partner with Seeding Labs is often very specific, and you can see that. For a company like Astrix, I guess, Belen, when you think about how sustainability drives innovation and growth, what are those competitive advantages that a firm like ours has?
So first of all, I loved what Melissa said about in the previous slide that kind of like talked about creating bridges, right? Because that's pretty much what we're going into. But let me start with a distinction that for me changes everything. You have the opportunity of having a transactional sustainability partnership, and you have an intentional sustainability partnership, right? So a transactional partnership would look like a company writes a check to a nonprofit, puts a logo on a report, calls it a community investment, Again, it's not meaningless, but it does not compound. Sometimes I've seen companies even donate to different charitable contributions that are completely away from their core business, when they could potentially maximize that investment if they've done it in organizations, nonprofits as well, that were supporting their business. Um, so if it doesn't compound, it doesn't reinforce inside the business as well. And when the budget becomes a little tight, that we've all seen that in the past few years, it's the first thing to go. So an intentional partnership is designed from the beginning to generate value that flows in multiple directions simultaneously, to the business, to employees, to communities, to partners, and back again. So if done well, it can even be something that creates redistribution of wealth at some point, right? So thank you. If we see at this slide, right at the center of this diagram, it's shared value creation. It's not charity, not PR, not compliance. So the concept that competitiveness and of a company and the health of the communities around it is deeply interconnected, you know. So notice how the arrows don't just point outwards from the business to the community, they kind of like loop. And we can bring it to what and connect it to what Melissa said. It's like little bridges, right? Everything is connected there. So every action generates returns across all the dimensions. So for example, employee of the community are the purpose-driven work that fuels that social impact program. Clients and strategy provide kind of like the ESG credentials that drive premium positioning and new business wins. It's the same organization, it's the same work, but the value created simultaneously for people in commercial pipeline, you know? So it's like you can do one action, but benefit all of the actors. So there's a lot of things that a company gain from partnerships. Of course, I feel that every actor involved in this process gains a lot from their own perspective, but also because they give a lot. Like having the right partner, like for example, partnering with the organizations like Seeding Labs that are so professional in what they're doing, is a key strategy in being able to get that advantage back, right? So what does a company actually gain? For example, talent that stays and talent that comes. When your people are connected to something meaningful, you reduce attrition and attraction professionals who have choices. In a very competitive market like life sciences, that's a very important deal. Market credibility is something that no marketing campaign can buy. A genuine multi-year partnership with verifiable impact sends a signal that no, it's not replicable by any marketing campaign, because results will walk with you. Your own stakeholders will be the ones sharing the information from experience, not just replicating noise, you know. Internal capability. When your employees do cross-sector work like mentoring, consulting, training outside the organization, they develop skills, and those skills come back to the business in one way or form. And one great example we have at Astrix, for example, is our employee resource groups that we call community connections. And actually, it was the initiative of one of the community connections called the Purpose Lab to have an internal corporate volunteering program and connect us to the partnership with Seeding Lab. So to make this concrete, let me give you that specific example. If you see here on this slide, we're designing a multi-layered and very intentional partnership, because Astrix does not have lab equipment. So you'll ask, like, how do we fit in this process if they don't have lab equipment? But and I'm sure that Melissa, when she provides the examples later, she will talk about this. When you start with an initiative and you try to solve a problem that matters, you're going to find a lot of other problems that need to be solved as well, and where you need the support and the partnership. So for us, we wanted to be part of this, and we thought, okay, how can we do it based on how our business works, our model, our talent, our business strategy, our stakeholders' interests. So we've created 4 pillars. The first one will be like the pro bono lab consulting, which is basically supporting the beneficiaries of the lab equipment and help them understand how to run a lab, how to properly even create a business around research and consulting. The number two will be the mentorship one-on-one consulting. Sometimes scientists in these academic spaces in this in these developing countries that receive the equipment don't have or lack certain skills that are required for the job. And having a mentor who has been on the business, it's very seasoned and it's been on the business and has all the knowledge can be extremely helpful. That also connects people that are not scientists, right? So people in finance, people in HR, people in legal, in compliance. So anyone in an organization can be part of that process. Then the third one is the telescience training program platform, which is we create our own program. We already have our own internal program to train our employees. And the idea of this is creating a program that can be shared outside the walls of Astrix to the community and for people to be able to learn at their own pace through that process. And finally, the fourth one, which is, I'm not going to say it's my favorite because I love all four of them, but it is. It's client co-volunteering, which is inviting everyone, that everyone that's listening and everybody else that wants to be part of an initiative to come and join and say, I want to be part of this in any capacity, or we'll figure out the capacity in which they can join and make this grow, because that's what can take this to the next level. It's the multiplier effect. And having that rigorous framework can help us set up the right measures from the beginning so we can truly measure social impact at the end of the process. And when I say the end, it's maybe in a few years, but it will never end because it will become sustainable and it will continue. So you can see the difference between a transactional partnership and a very intentional partnership that's connected to the business strategy and that hopefully will continue for many years to come, even if leadership in both organizations change.
Yeah. Yeah, I think looking at sustainability through that lens of systems thinking, even just how sustainability is an interlocking system of different bridges, both with Astrix and Seeding Labs, is very compelling. I just think that's really, really cool. So, Melissa, I know you and I have talked in the past, and Seeding Labs really has a lot of, you could call them stories or examples or outcomes, but it's really a way for us to get connected and better understand what you all do. So maybe you could walk us through just some real world examples and how folks at Astrix could then see themselves in some of these stories as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anthony. So, just kind of like reframing, when we think about partnership, like this conversation is about partnership, as Belen said, it's all about the shared goals. And it really makes me so happy to listen to Belen talk about, Astrix and Seeding Labs, because it's clear that they have the interests of Seeding Labs right at the forefront. And when we do corporate partnerships, we're the same, right? I think about how we can communicate our value, which is the social impact that we're having, back in ways that support the corporate goals. And so I've got here 2 examples to share. The first one is about how our strong metrics and data help validate corporate efforts in external ranking systems. So we work with a number of pharma companies, and they have a social commitment to contribute to global access to medicines. For the 20 largest pharma, there's actually an externally run ranking called the Access to Medicines Index. And many of the companies actually have teams internally dedicated to collecting data from across the organization just to report to this index. And that's where Seeding Labs comes in, and that's where we make a good partner for these pharma companies, because one of the measures that they look at is the pharma companies' contributions to R&D capacity building in low and middle income countries. So, you know, if you remember what Anthony said about what Seeding Labs does, that's exactly what we do. So, you know, when our index corporate partners are assembling their data, which is a big effort that they do every 2 years, we provide them with the metrics and data for the impact that we've made together, and it's customized to the reporting needs of the Access to Medicines Index. And then beyond that, not just, you know, giving that data, we also work together with some of our index partners to speak directly with the foundation that runs this index to provide them with a larger context of, you know, what we're doing and explain how the companies work together to support our efforts. So it's not just, you know, the numbers and the words on their reporting, but we could, you know, talk directly to the foundation and tell that story. And, you know, what you see here on the slide is because of those efforts, in the 2021 Access to Medicine Index, the foundation actually named collaboration with Seeding Labs a best practice for R&D capacity building. And so that, I think, is just one of the clearest demonstrations of, you know, the impact of partnerships that we can have and the benefits that it can have for helping companies meet their goals. And another example that I wanted to share with you is, you know, kind of a different side of it. I talked about how, you know, we use our data to support the Access to Medicines Index measurements, but part of our data is, you know, the stories and using those stories to help companies connect with and inspire their various audiences. So, you know, for pharma companies, donating equipment to Seeding Labs is an easy thing to do. It's not their product. It's things that are truly excess. But for equipment manufacturers, right, asking for donations of equipment, well, that's their product. So when we worked with this particular equipment manufacturer, they said, well, we really need to have a business case for working with you, which makes sense. We're kind of a competitor. So they actually brought their team together. They brought together people across the organization in different divisions, and they came up with this trade-in program. And the way this trade-in program works is they put together this deal for, you know, a discount for upgrading your PCR machines to a new, you know, to the upgraded model. They put together some consumables, and you had to trade in your equipment, your older equipment. Company would refurbish it, and then they would donate it to Seeding Labs. And as part of that, at that campaign, we actually put together and brought together stories of a couple scientists who were going to benefit from these PCR donations. And so you've got Enoch here. You know, this is an example of one of the testimonials that we included in the marketing campaign. And, you know, he's talking about how it's going to increase their capacity for improving quality of seeds, which is the work that they do in Benin. So, you know, at the end of this campaign, which actually has been running for a couple of years, our corporate partners told us that it did show actually value for their revenue. And it was a huge value for Seeding Labs, as we had this consistent supply of PCR machines that we could include in our you know, in our programming. And so, so yeah, I hope those two stories have, you know, started to help the audience members think about different ways that you could be partnering.
Yeah, I think when we think about in just because we're all part of companies, that, you know, what does that measurable impact look like? And you started that pivot from here's a story, and then here's how it could actually here's what it would look like. I know you and I were talking about this slide, and I love this slide because, you know, who doesn't love good framework slide? but I think it's a really good way of grounding that conversation for folks around, well, what are those outcomes and what do those outcomes look like? And maybe you could walk us through a couple of examples, or just maybe explore this a little bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of like laughing inside because I love this slide too. And you guys remember when we were kind of going through this, you had to stop me. Like, Melissa, you're talking too much about this. But to answer your question, directly, these measures start with the social impact. And, what we're doing is building capacity for science and strengthening the innovation ecosystem. And so when you're talking about this kind of capacity building, there's a really long path between the outputs, like the direct activities that you're doing, and the ultimate impact. So for Seeding Labs, we start at our outputs. That's shipments of equipment sent to universities. So, it looks like the number of shipments, the number of universities, which for us has reached 135 universities, the footprint of where it's gone. We've run this program. We've supported universities in 43 countries. Then the immediate next thing after that, okay, what happens after we send the equipment? That's the first level of outcomes. Outcomes like 270,000 students with access to equipment, which means they can now train, have lab courses, do research work for undergraduates, master's and PhD students actually, and 4,000 scientists who now have access to the equipment to, accelerate their research. And that's what's happening at the university. But at the next level, after that, we say, okay, well, what impact is this having outside of the university? And those are outcomes like students entering the workforce. We have evidence-based solutions for local challenges and an overall strengthened innovation ecosystem. And then there's one more level, the impact. What does it mean for humanity's sustainability, which is where we started this conversation. And our impact is ultimately locally led development, where people and institutions have the agency to define and pursue progress on their own terms. And then we have a world that is more in balance and more equitable, where the benefits of science, can reach across different parts of society and different parts of people. And, with all of those blocks, we have quantitative and qualitative measures. But, it really matters to tell the stories of like what's actually happening here. So I want to give you a couple examples. So in workforce development and STEM education, in Namibia, they have a dire shortage of pharmaceutical staff. In 2004, there was an estimation that there was only one, pharmacist or pharmatech per 10,000 people in the country. Now, the University of Namibia was one of the, major universities in Namibia, and needed to address this challenge. And so what they did is they started a new program in training pharmacists. And this program was actually the first program in the country for pharmacist training. And this started in about 2011. So, they wanted to start this program, but they needed to have quality training. They didn't have the resources to get it. So they turned to Seeding Labs, and we provided them with the equipment to train all of their pharmacists. And now, more than 10 years later, they now have 2.7 pharmacists for every 10,000 people. So that's one example of the educational impact. Another example is the research impact. And here we have Enoch again, who I introduced in that PCR training campaign. And Enoch works on orphan crops that are, we call them orphan crops because researchers don't spend time, like globally, we spend very little effort understanding orphan crops. But they're crops that local people depend on. And So what Enoch and his department is doing is they're studying how to improve the nutrition of the local crops, how to improve the productivity so that farmers can, you know, have a sustainable livelihood growing these local crops, and you know, society can have can meet the nutritional needs by eating the foods that they're culturally you know, and traditionally eating. And then the last piece I mentioned, an outcome, is stronger scientific institutions. So example that I have here is coming from the Dominican Republic at UNIBE, the Universidad Iberoamericana. And they wanted to start the first research institute in the Caribbean to focus on tropical medicine and global health. So they didn't have the equipment again, and they applied to us for equipment. So we put together a shipment, and a number of things happened when the shipment came. First, they, you know, when the rector of the university saw this shipment, they're like, oh, we did not allocate nearly enough space for all of this equipment. And so the first thing they did was say, like, you need to have this space. And they got some of the building space at a local hospital that they're affiliated with to you know, host the lab. So that's, you know, right off the bat, getting more resources towards this institute. Because they had this equipment, when they started off, when they launched, they were able to bring in 6 grants, something like that, 6 or 9 grants within the first 6 months. The reputation of the institution, you know, grew. The director of the center, during the pandemic, he was, you know, he was basically the Dominican Republic's Anthony Fauci. I don't know if he would call himself that, but I would call himself that. And so, you know, you have this institution now being able to create knowledge. The knowledge is going to government, is building policies, and you know, all of these things are happening with the spark of equipment coming in. So
that's really, really cool. So Belen, I know we were when we were talking about this slide around coming full circle back from systems thinking to the interplay and bridges. And this is really, if we think about how Astrix and our program that we're launching here, maybe you could just walk us through how that partnering with Seeding Labs will really just kind of manifest in these I guess you call it interfaces.
Absolutely, and I just have to reiterate how important it is to have the right partner, and now you see why, with all the amazing examples that Melissa has shared. But yes, if you look at this, I love this slide because it talks about measurement in a very different, from a very different perspective, okay? So measurement alone is not the goal. The goal is understanding how your actions connect and reinforce with each other. So that is what you can see exactly here. It's not a list of what we measure. It shows why measuring across pillars matters more than measuring each other in isolation. So you can see that, for example, with People and Planet, our remote operating model reduces our carbon footprint while improving work-life balance and expanding access to talent across geographies. So you measure you have one operational decision and you get 3 measurable returns, you know? So it's one action with a higher impact. And that's the multiplier effect. And we have the same with Planet and Prosperity, with Governance and Prosperity, with People in Governance. And you can play around and interchange the circles, and you will always find something that you can measure combining the metrics. And I think that space where the pillars interconnect, that's truly where sustainable processes and innovation and changing business as usual happens. and stays. So I have to be very honest about metrics. In our first years, we measure what was the easiest, and that's fine. That's okay. You have to do something that's kind of like very low hanging fruit. Also, to get people to understand that measuring things can help us understand the impact we're creating. But once you start with that cross functionality, and really trying to understand those little spaces, that's where the work becomes a little harder. But it also starts speaking about how one department connects with another department, how the partnership is benefit us, but at the same time we're creating shared value for that partnership and that stakeholder. So you start, it's a different type of language. We start communicating between actors through the data, and data is undeniable. It's a story that you can, like, if you can tell a story with data, that transforms sustainability from a reporting obligation to something that's truly strategic. It stops being decorative, it's performative. So I think that that's the beauty of data and measurement, that you can actually tell the story of interconnectedness and cross functionality through that.
Yeah, I think that's just very, 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 very cool. So I mean, we're kind of rounding out here our hour, and just to kind of, I guess we do have some questions that if we have a little bit of time, I guess one that I'm seeing here to you, Melissa, how would folks partner with Seeding Labs? That just in general, I guess.
Well, that's a very convenient question with the slide. So first of all, get in touch with us. And let's have a conversation. You can reach out to us at giving@seedinglabs.org. Our website is very easy, seedinglabs.org. But there's a number of ways, just kind of generally, that you can partner with Seeding Labs. Equipment donation is a big one. That's the big value that we provide. But as Anthony and Belen were talking about, also there's ways that you can share your expertise to support our mission. And of course, we don't run on good vibes. I would love to run on good vibes, but we don't. And financial support for the organization is really, really helpful. Whether you're donating as an individual or, different corporations have different kinds of funding that you might be able to apply towards a partnership with an organization like Seeding Labs. Those are all different ways that you can connect. And as I showed in our examples, you can be really creative about how these things connect to your specific goals to make these, beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. And Belen, I know I suspect this is an Astrix employee is asking, how can I help or join a client co-volunteering event? So I guess that's.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So first of all, if it's coming from an employee, join the Purpose Lab. Actually, that's how the Community Connections team is called. Is the Purpose Lab. And I think the name speaks volumes about what they are trying to achieve. If you're outside the organization and you still want to support or join our collective co-volunteering, you're a client or you're a provider, you're a supplier, you can still connect with us, and we'll find a way to make you part of the process in the program. Like I said, that and for example, what Melissa covered in terms of impacts and beneficiaries, that there's a whole other story that we're not even mentioning right here about the people who get the indirect benefits of the intervention. And that goes in many ways. It goes to the nonprofit, it goes to the community, to the families of the students that become great scientists and improve their life income, and then their kids are going to go to better schools, have better health access. Like, it's a multiplier effect. And the same thing goes to our clients, to our partners, to our suppliers. You will get a lot of benefits from participating here, personal, professional, connected to the business strategy. It's a win-win situation from wherever you look at it. So join us.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up, but I guess, right, you want to build the world you want to live in, right? So thank you very much. And I think that's the end of our webinar. So thank you both, and hope to see you in person soon.
This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you both.